Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today I'm super excited to show you the upcoming game from the folks that brought us Battle Brothers. MENACE is a turn-based tactical RPG set in the far future that takes many of the same brutal and complex systems from the fantasy world of Battle Brothers and transposes them onto a sci-fi setting. Please keep in mind that this is a very early look at the game, so a lot can change between now and release, and details should be taken with a grain of salt. But if you like what you see here today, consider adding the game to your wishlist, as that's a great way to support indie developers especially, particularly because of how visibility on Steam actually works. It's also a great motivator, and it lets you stay on top of development too. You'll find the link in the pinned comment down below. And if you enjoy this video, consider hitting the like button and dropping a comment. Heads up, this channel is affiliated with the publisher Hooded Horse, and for more details on that, you can check the video linked in the video description. With all that said, and with timestamps down below, let's begin. The situation at hand. The game takes place in the far future in an isolated system known as the Wayback, dubbed perhaps somewhat ironically because there is currently no way back from it to the core worlds, with its local jump gate currently unoperational. Your overall mission is to, with the help of your Marines, pacify the system and reconnect it with the central core, but in the process of doing so, you find yourself engaged with a strange alien threat, a hybrid of technology and biology in a way similar to the Strogg from the Quake universe. When they eventually rise up amidst the chaos, the titular enemy, the MENACE, so to speak, introduces a whole new set of considerations on the battlefield as they behave and operate differently from any of the enemies you will have taken on until that point. While things eventually escalate to that, your early days are spent traveling from planet to planet, responding to distress beacons, and engaging with much more human foes. As you do so, you'll come across a variety of factions that are currently in charge of various parts of the system or otherwise vying for power. Without connection to a centralized authority, things are a little chaotic here with pirate raids, roving mercenaries, and who knows what else. So you'll be engaging with a large variety of enemy types that all have different kinds of units, featuring different kinds of vehicles, different types of guns, armor, accessories, so on and so forth. And you'll need to adapt your approach to each kind of enemy accordingly. At the same time, you'll be making friends with the various groups that you help out, gaining access to additional support locally. Sometimes this will take the form of additional abilities to use on and off the battlefield, providing upgrades to your arsenal or your ship, for example, and sometimes this will give you access to additional characters to employ as squad leaders, which in turn means more options on the battlefield. The overall experience when playing MENACE is a character-driven experience. The plan is for MENACE to feature a huge variety of characters as squad leaders, and any single playthrough will pick a large but random selection from that massive pool, meaning each playthrough will have a great degree of variance to keep you on your toes. Each character will have different histories, and they'll have different opinions of each other based on their backgrounds and allegiances, which means some runs might introduce conflicts or opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist. One of my favorite aspects of Battle Brothers has always been the character backstories. Whether it's your overall party's backstory or that of each individual you hire to join your band, there's an extra layer of personality added with a character-centric approach, and MENACE is clearly looking to develop those ideas even further. Each squad leader here goes beyond the individual characters of Battle Brothers in terms of starting depth. They all have hates, wants, needs, and opinions that need balancing. Sometimes their backgrounds will intertwine from before the start of the game, and sometimes their histories will make them particularly averse to or fond of specific other squad leaders. Some will be hard to keep happy, some will easily fall in line, and some might actually be a source of greater friction. You don't have to get along with everybody in every run, and your tolerance for egos and demands will have an impact on your campaign, as will the decisions you make when tensions come to a head. You'll be able to go between parts of your ship, the strike cruiser Impetus, and have conversations with your various squad leaders to get a better sense of how they're feeling and manage their morale, which in turn has direct battlefield impacts, of course. It's important to understand that each individual actually leads a small squad, so it's not like they stand alone as individuals on the battlefield. With that said, if a squad suffers enough damage, you will suffer the consequences. Permadeath is a thing here, and you can absolutely lose squad leaders on the battlefield, and just like that, all those wants, needs, and relationships come to a sudden halt for that character. Moving on from the leaders themselves, it's important to note that equipment is largely interchangeable between squads, something I'll describe in greater detail in just a moment. What this means, though, is that one of the biggest impacts of a squad leader comes from perks you've picked for them through promotions earned over time. Each squad leader has a specific set of perks to choose from at each level as they progress, and though their squads might have interchangeable equipment, perks associated with a squad leader might make a certain kind of equipment more or less effective in the hands of their squad, influencing in some ways how you actually kit them out. It's worth noting that the ability to promote your squad leaders is earned through a shared resource that you acquire by successfully completing missions. This means a squad that had to skip a mission or two doesn't automatically end up left behind in terms of capabilities. This aside, another way your squad leaders will impact performance on the battlefield has to do with things like morale and relations. I touched on them briefly earlier, but to add a bit more detail, as you travel between planets, you'll engage in conversations with your squad leaders and get a better understanding again of their backgrounds and which of your decisions they might approve or disapprove of. This will pair with what missions you take on and which factions you choose to work with. Helping a certain group might gain you the approval of an associated squad leader, while upsetting one who is opposed to the group you helped. This has the potential to further impact each playthrough in some interesting ways, though you still have control over which squad leaders you actually take on board, of course. And again, the options available to you in the first place will be different between new campaigns as well, keeping you on your toes and ensuring things don't ever end up predictable just because one character or another shows up. Now, even though I previously said equipment is interchangeable, there are some examples of equipment being exclusively determined by the squad leader. So why don't we take a moment to discuss tools of the trade. While most squad leaders are in charge of infantry squads, some of them are designated pilots. This means they'll come in as a singular unit, with that unit being some kind of vehicle or other. They're not attached to any one vehicle though. You can pick and choose as needed for the mission at hand, and these vehicles can be standard issue marine tanks and walkers, or they can be vehicles you've looted from the battlefield, giving you a plethora to choose from, including the pirate faction's jerry-rigged trucks with anything from laser cannons to flamethrowers to missile launchers strapped on top. Vehicles are obviously a powerful tool on the battlefield, and each has its strengths and weaknesses. Tanks, for example, are heavy hitters, but it costs action points when rotating to acquire a target. Walkers, meanwhile, are able to swivel on a dime without spending action points, meaning they're much more nimble. Artillery is clearly capable of indirect fire, and other vehicles will surely provide other opportunities and pitfalls alike. Vehicles will have customizable loadouts with accessories to swap in and out as needed, partly determined by the vehicle itself, but that's just for pilots. Your other squad leaders are able to pick from a huge variety of guns, armor, and accessories alike. The armor you choose determines, of course, how well protected the squad is from incoming damage, though it also determines how many accessory slots the squad will have. Those slots can be filled with grenades of various kinds, from smokes to frags, or you can get scouting equipment to spot enemy units you might otherwise not be aware of, hidden for one reason or another. That aside, you've got the main gun that the majority of the squad uses, and a specialist weapon for one individual in the squad to arm themselves with. Your options for either slot will have a huge set of statistics to consider that'll determine how effective a weapon is under different circumstances. From their ranges to their damage output, armor penetration, ability to suppress targets, and accuracy, there's a lot to consider. What's more, each weapon can have different firing modes to choose between, and they have their accuracy and damage based on distance, and it's not just a linear fall-off either. Each weapon has its own chart that you'll want to keep in mind when fighting on the battlefield, positioning your troops to maximize the balance between damage output and accuracy without risking the lives of your troops. Specialist guns include everything from flamethrowers to rocket launchers to heavy machine guns, snipers, and more, and I think it goes without saying how assigning one or the other can completely change how a squad operates. Again, some of the decisions you make here will be impacted by the perks you pick out for the squad leader, but overall, you also need to keep an eye on your supply limit. Your kit for any given mission will be limited by your total supply and how much it costs to bring a specific weapon, armor, accessory, squad, or vehicle to the battlefield. This prevents you from straight up rolling out with a bunch of tanks backed by heavily armored plasma gun-wielding assault squads for every single engagement, working like points do for army setup in popular tabletop wargaming franchises. Equipment is a very big deal here, with tons of options worth exploring, mixing and matching to find the synergies that work for you and the squad leaders you have on hand. Equipment will determine available actions, and some need you to deploy your troops or otherwise sacrifice mobility for optimal use. Picking the right squad to make that sacrifice with will have massive implications on the battlefield. But alright, you've got your squad leaders and you've got your equipment. Now, how do they actually engage in battle? Massive tactical battles. Tactical battles in Menace will keep you on your toes in a few different ways. For one, they're gonna be brutal. Just like Battle Brothers, bad decision making on the battlefield here will be expensive, resulting in dead squad leaders and lost resources. You need to navigate cover expertly across massive battlefields, keeping an eye out for units capable of indirect fire that can pummel you from a distance, while also needing to concern yourself with close quarters combat breaking out as well, where every shot fired has the potential to suppress the squad it lands next to, whether they were the intended target or not. Suppression is a really important factor here, as bullets and munitions of other kinds are considered to be a threat regardless of where they land and who they were aimed at. If they fly or land near a unit, suppression starts to kick in, whether any damage was dealt or not. A burst of spray fire on a clumped grouping of a few squads, then, is a viable way to try and suppress all of them, but be warned, that goes both ways. This adds another element to consider when positioning your troops, or choosing who to target and with what. The same weapon can be used to shoot to kill or to shoot to suppress, and the choice, of course, is yours. Different weapons are more or less capable of suppressing or killing. Suppression can slow a unit down or, past a certain threshold, pin it in place. This means leaving a unit out in the open or otherwise improperly positioned is quickly punished. Situational awareness is paramount. This is especially true because of the I go, you go system in place, where initiative roles are thrown out the window, and instead, every involved party takes their order going back and forth, able to pick any one of the squads under their purview to use on their turn before it becomes the other party's turn to move one of theirs, and then back and forth one by one until every squad has been moved, unlocking them all for another round of moves and actions once a loop is complete. This means picking who goes when is a crucial part of the battle at hand, and since both sides of the battle can pick any squad to act as long as it hasn't previously acted in the same round, you'll need to make sure your moves are made with a multitude of variables in mind each time. Again, situational awareness is key, and that's why accessories that let you see enemies in the fog of war, or that help you hide units that find themselves out of position, are vital to help you plan. Objectives will vary based on the mission at hand as well, and what's especially cool here is how missions work on the grand scale. See, you go from planet to planet answering distress calls. When you arrive, an entire procedurally generated operation unfolds in front of you, often spanning across the entire planet. This operation has branching paths of missions, each of which has its own objectives, its own battlefield, and its own rewards on successful completion. Some of these rewards are straightforward, like additional equipment for you. Other rewards have a cascading effect on the rest of your operation. Choosing the mission that takes out the enemy factory might reduce their armor in all future missions during the operation, but taking that mission on might be a risk in and of itself, since the factory is likely to be heavily defended. So, even outside the battlefield itself, battles are being innovated on with how they tie together and how consequences help or hamper. There's like this middle strategic layer between the actual strategic layer and the tactical layer, and it's all very intriguing in how it taps into procedural generation and how it basically again revolutionizes the relationship between strategic and tactical layers. If you like the sound of Menace, or you like Battle Brothers and want to support the devs on their next foray, make sure you go and wishlist the game on Steam, linked in the pinned comment down below. Again, it's a great way to help indie developers especially, particularly because of how visibility works on Steam. Plus, I'm sure it's a great motivator. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, consider hitting the like button down below. I'm really excited to cover Menace on the lead up to and after release. You can expect a lot more coverage on the channel, so you might want to consider subscribing if you want to stay up to date with it and other strategic and tactical games. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.